All right. You want to start by introducing yourself and telling the people at home what it is that you do and how you are changing the world?
Sure. Hey everyone, I'm Bryony Cole. I am a Lovehoney sexpert and I am founder of Future of Sex. So I spend my days looking at sex and technology and how the world is changing and what the future of sex looks like.
A genius, a superhero. Um, so to kick us off, I would love to ask you about what your definition of the word pleasure is. I think pleasure is a word that has so much weight and intrigue behind it, and also means so many different things to so many different people. So how exactly does it resonate with you?
Oh, I love this question. I mean, the simplest thing that comes to mind is pleasure is about feeling good in your body. But if we really want to go there and think about pleasure in different dimensions, it's not only feeling good as in a physical sense, but pleasure is about your emotional well-being as well. You know, some people would take it to spiritual and feeling connected, but pleasure is so many different things. And for me, feeling good in my body and also in my mind is like, it's key.
Yeah. For me, whether it's in the context of sex or food or just like experiencing positive emotions, so much of pleasure is just allowing yourself to not feel shame and meeting
Mm,
yourself where you are without judgment. And I actually think that so much of what a lot of people consider to be indulgent isn't actually indulgent. It's just admitting to what you want and giving yourself what you want. And so for me, pleasure has so much to do simply with freedom. I really
yeah.
see it as freedom.
Yeah. I think everyone struggles with shaking off the old shackles of shame, right? In varying degrees. And shackles is a great thing because it is about that freedom. I love that. That's so just like juicy and feels so real. Oh, I'm getting all in my feelings already.
I know. And then also you said the word shackles, and I was like, well, shackles aren't always a bad thing, depending on the context of when you're using them.
Right
Um,
then.
so getting serious and professional. Um, Obviously, the pandemic has upended all of our lives in so many ways, and most of those ways have been pretty tragic. But I
Mm.
would love to know if you feel as though there's been a silver lining when it comes to sex and intimacy as a result of not only how much time we've all had to spend at home, but kind of reevaluating like what we want out of life and what we want out
Mm.
of our relationships, both romantic and platonic, and what we want out of ourselves. So I would love to not only hear your opinion on that, but also know if there's any
Mm.
data or research that was done on how the outlook on sex and intimacy has changed recently.
Yeah, it is. It's such an interesting area. And before we get stuck in, I just want to say, yeah, some people are having a ton of sex, but there's also people that aren't having any sex. And just acknowledging that we're all having different experiences of this. And I think that the research reflects that a lot, right? Like there
Yeah.
are people that are having no sex, there are people that are home alone, there are couples. What's interesting to me when we dive into the research, especially the research Lovehoney's done around COVID, is that couples are having more adventurous sex. So for all the stories we hear in the media about like, skyrocketing divorce rate and people going crazy, and our own personal experience, right? Like I'm sitting across from my boyfriend for 7 months, seeing him every day. I love him dearly, but suddenly I realized, do you have to chew like that? Like, do you have to eat? The
Don't look at
tiniest
me. Don't
things.
breathe at me. Yeah.
Yes, those things become amplified in this life that we're living these days. Everything is accelerated, and so for a lot of people, they're experiencing like crappy times in their relationships or breaking up. What I do notice is those people were probably experiencing that before or having second thoughts, especially in like the divorce rates that we're seeing. Instead of sensationalizing that, there's like people were having trouble before they went into lockdown, and now we've just put a big old magnifying glass up to our own relationships, up to ourselves, and thinking about and reflecting on what do we want, what do we even enjoy these days, and thinking through that experience. So people have had a lot more time to A, have fun, B, be bored, and then search for meaning. And that's really reflected in the data, where we see this surge in people buying sex toys. And that doesn't really discriminate between couples or singles. Both are buying sex toys in huge numbers. And the data behind us tells us that that's not only people that have bought sex toys before, they're certainly trading up and getting into more interesting purchases, or expanding their ideas of what pleasure and excitement might mean, and going in different directions of like accessories, which we can get into. But it's also first-time purchases, which I think is great. I think it reflects the change in conversation around normalizing masturbating. It's people that are purchasing a vibrator for the first time and going, oh yeah, well, yeah, and now I realize I've been locked inside my home. Like, an orgasm is essential, and maybe I will buy this now that I'm in the privacy of my own home. And it seems like purchases of sex toys are becoming a little less intimidating for everyone, which is great.
Yeah, I would definitely agree with that. And I also think it's interesting to see people on Instagram, outside of the data that you see as a professional, just even on a more localized level, people on Instagram being so much more overt with their emotions about, I feel sad, I feel lonely, I miss human contact, I feel like, when's the next time I'm ever going to be able to meet somebody or have sex with somebody? And I wonder, how much of the emotional freedom that people are now finding to express themselves in that way also translates to sexual freedom, with saying, okay, I've identified that I have these emotional needs or these emotional voids, and so what am I going to do about it? Buy a dildo or whatever it is,
Well, yeah, I think the big thing is we all have a lot of time now. So like, I love that Instagram insight, because it made me think, yeah, people aren't going on vacations or like being able to capture their great meal, or, and I love Instagram. There's so many different uses for it. But because we can't access that content anymore, it's sort of been flipped and reversed on us. And yeah, people are talking a lot more about the taboos. Now, whether that is sex and orgasms and using toys, or whether that is mental health and depression and anxiety, and oh my gosh, this lockdown is like, doing things to my mental health. What I think is we're all suddenly focused on the self and going inward a lot more. Now, for people that are stuck at home, it hasn't been like such a quick thing of like, oh, well, I'm stuck at home, better buy a sex toy. But I think that nice like expanse of time has allowed people to feel their way through, to eventually get to a point where they're like, maybe I'll try this thing. Like, there needs to be enough time. They're like, well, I'm not doing anything else. Why don't I just go down this rabbit hole, and then boom, 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 and they end up buying a glass dildo or something. So it has been, in a way, for the sex tech industry, fantastic. I think there's never been more of a focus on sexuality and sex in our social media feeds, the content that we're seeing on the screens, in celebrity culture, which is great and open. And I think there's all those challenges within that, whether that's having a relationship or dating during lockdown, or what do I watch online, or what entertainment can I find to increase my arousal. So there's just so many juicy ways this has gone for people. But not to rant on too much, I think the net effect is people are talking about sex more, and that's a good thing.
Yes, absolutely. And on the topic of identity and self and technology, obviously, as much as I hate to admit it, Zoom has become kind of the center point of all of our professional lives. It has replaced day-to-day human interaction. And obviously, it has streamlined our workflow. But I also wonder if the amount of time that we've all spent looking at ourselves in a camera, not in the two-dimensional photo way, but in the live, raw, moving, three-dimensional way, kind of, has bled out from just work and has inspired us to maybe explore cyber sex or FaceTime sex more, as opposed to the usual nude photo exchange. I'm always very curious to kind of track the progress of how we all see ourselves via the digital landscape. And I really do wonder if you think that the amount of time that we spend seeing ourselves on video is going to translate into the types of socially distanced or geographically distanced sex that we're having with others.
Yeah, you're right on there with your hunch, in that there's two major things that are happening. One, because online still, we grew up with screens, we still feel like there's a barrier. So there's like a level of protection, whether there is or isn't. We still feel slightly anonymized or able to, separate ourselves from the self that appears through a screen. And so the effect of that, when we can't go out and have sex, with other people without screens, we're seeing this increase in FaceTime sex, but also in the rise of online sex parties. And what you hear anecdotally from the sex parties is people are coming in and doing things that they wouldn't have normally done ever at that point in time at a sex party or in real life. People are visiting for the first time and feeling a sense of safety, which is completely artificial, to be honest, because it could go the other way, right? We need more education around how do we protect our digital identity? How do we identify with ourselves online and make sure our identities aren't, stolen, or, protect ourselves from sexting and revenge porn and all those sorts of things.
Absolutely.
So there's this interesting behavior right now where people are feeling a bit more brazen. And one, I would say it's a good thing for experimenting with your sexuality. Like attending an online sex party could be great if you haven't done that in person yet and still want to get a sense for it. It's like technology's allowed us to step into the gray zone and experience things without feeling like we're fully there, which, to be fair, we're not. So I think that's really interesting. I think the second trend that we're seeing is tapping into that idea of, oh my gosh, we've been on Zoom for ages, for months now. People are feeling somewhat Zoom fatigued, and they're exposing or much more comfortable with an unedited version of themselves. So where pre-COVID, we had like 20 different filters and might review our Instagram caption.
And the face tune and everything is perfect. Oh my God. Yeah. Yeah.
So the unedited movement is, I think, born out of COVID, and I'm all for it. But I think that that's an interesting thing that we didn't see coming, because everyone in the tech industry was so focused on like, let's create more filters and how can people edit versions of themselves. And what we're seeing now is people are going online unedited and they're doing things that they probably wouldn't do sexually in real life. And we've always seen that with like forums, right? Like think about forums and trolls. People say stuff they wouldn't normally say to your face.
Yeah.
But it's just now we've pushed that out. So there's good and bad to come of that, but I think in the context of what we're talking about, pleasure and things, I think the positive light we can shine is people are exploring and dipping their toes in areas they probably wouldn't have gone as quickly.
Yeah, and I absolutely think that in and of itself is a super pleasurable thing, to just test your own boundaries and realize that perhaps things that you were really afraid of before, or you thought were way too far out for you, are actually things that you're uber comfortable with, or perhaps that you wanted all along. And, I think that we've all been doing a lot of thinking about who we want to be in the future and what the future even looks like. And I think that there's so much opportunity to discover our identities as, holistic humans through testing our sexual boundaries. And I wish that was talked about more, that, you can figure out not only what you like in the bedroom, but also just how you want to be seen in the world through testing your sexual limits.
Oh, speaking my language. I love it. Like but I will say I'm a perpetual optimist. To work on the future of sex, I think you have to be. But the idea that out of all of this sort of like, unexpected suffering for a lot of people is something that's born, that is people that are more in tune with their identities and their sexualities. Like, that is something that I'm glad I didn't take another decade,
Yeah, absolutely. So when it comes to couples, there are some couples who have been cohabitating in the flesh and not just making it work long distance through having, as we've been discussing, FaceTime sex, for example. And as you mentioned before, in referencing your boyfriend, when you spend so much time with somebody, obviously there's a lot of increased intimacy and increased time to experiment there. But like, I'm very sure you can also get to a point where you're just like, I can't do this for another second. And, I would love to hear your point of view about like some specific hurdles that you think couples that are cohabitating are facing, and how you think that they can overcome those hurdles, because we've been speaking so much about, the holistic effect of emotional wellness and sexual wellness and physical wellness. And this seems like a really good place to kind of bring that all together and talk about how it might come together.
Yeah, I mean, what do couples want to know right now? They're like, how do I save my relationship? For the most part, people are like, well, we're doing all this crazy stuff. Like, A, can we have great sex? And B, like relationship and intimacy. So there are specific like practicals on both of that I find really interesting and useful. On the like intimacy side of things, in terms of like saving your relationship versus the physical act of sex, like, of course, there are all these things that we know we should be doing, but like probably you should do them, which is schedule FaceTimes with other people. Like, that's a positive use of technology. Yeah. It sounds cringy, but book in a date night and like take off your sweatpants and like do the date night thing, whether that's surfing, I said surfing online. I've been locked up too long.
Very 90s. I love it. This is a retro
it's a
conversation.
90s date night. It's a 90s date night.
We'll lean into the theme.
Surf the web, buy some sex toys, or think of activities that you can do together. Everyone's sick of puzzles. Like, what is an interesting, exciting thing you can find out about online, a new thing to try in the bedroom, something to give people. Want ideas, right? People are all after, what is a new idea? I'm sick of, doing puzzles and coming up with my own ideas. Lovehoney also have great card games as well, which kind of is like the cheating way of just coming up with ideas. And then I think the relationship stuff, like Esther Perel has this great talk. She talks about kvetching. Is that how you say it, Ali?
Yeah. You're a resident Jewish consultant. Yes, yes. Well done.
Like, that's still really important, to make space to kvetch, to complain. Like, this sucks. Like, we need to not be on all the time and be perfect all the time, and like create that space to complain with your partner about things. That's totally normal and actually really good thing to do. And then, switching to the bedroom. If we're sort of giving you tips on intimacy and relationship and making those things work. In terms of the sex stuff, like, there is a world out there of things to explore with each other. Now, you can go online and surf the web and find them. I think that's a really great way of actually introducing new things. And for these couples that we talk about in the survey, right, like 54% of couples are having more adventurous sex. What are they doing? Well, they're going and finding new novelty things. And one of the products that I think is hilarious and a great thing to do is called Clone a Willy, where you can like clone your own willy. There's also Clone a Pussy. Like, these sorts of things are like better than puzzles, right? And so creating space to have different sorts of sex and adventures, and whatever way you choose to do that, I think is still really important, and carving out not only date night, but a night or a time to have sex that feels good for both of you. So Yeah, I'm going to stop there because otherwise I could go off on like 50 different ideas.
No, I am enthralled. This is the sermon I was looking for. Okay, so two things. The first is on the topic of Clone a Willy and Clone a Pussy. I feel like that could either be a very, very fun thing to do with your partner, or it could be a radical act of self-love. Right? I feel like that could be something that would be awesome to do if you're alone and you're not feeling so great about yourself. I mean, that is the ultimate body worship, right?
Oh, that is so cool. Okay, I'm going to go one up on that. Actually, that's probably the coolest. But also, we were talking about couples, but I'm going to hijack it for singles because or people that are living. Okay, singles would be interesting to do that with someone you're dating. But if you are in a relationship with someone but they're apart from you, you could clone your own thing and send it to them. And I think that's also like
how romantic.
Yeah, we've got so many ideas here for these.
We're just everyone should just come to us. We have endless ideas, but really that's an amazing creation, and I feel like there's so many ways to use that. I'm hesitant to call it a toy. What should it like that art project? Yeah,
I mean it can double as a toy, but it seems like something that could be like a centerpiece on the table,
yeah,
or the wall. You know, depending how racy you want to get. I think. But that's what we're all looking for, right? We're either looking for fun or we're looking for like meaning and oh my gosh, help. But those two things, like they're so important in everyday life, and especially now is like, how do we inject some light into this situation?
Yeah, some humor, and nothing screams fun and light like having your flowers, your candle, and the model of your own dick. That's what people want to see on your living room table if you're hosting at home, because there's no bars and clubs to go to. Think of me, people. This is how you're going to better your social life. So the second thing I was going to bring up,
conversation.
Bouncing off what you were saying about creating space. I think that's so important because what we're dealing with right now is not only being stuck in our homes or our apartments or wherever we are, but the days are bleeding into each other. I don't know about you. I have no concept of time right now. None. And, you know, it used to be that we'd all live for the weekend. Now the weekends feel like weekdays. Weekdays feel like weekends. Workflow is weird. Everyone's making their own hours kind of. And so I think it is so important to create parameters of, you know, time, but also locations within your living space, no matter how big or small it is, because this idea of things being special or magical or kind of out of the ordinary, very difficult to find that when each day feels like the next and the vibe outside of our window is a little bit grim. So I love everything you said about really trying to designate certain times for certain things, because infusing sexiness into a sweatpants, Netflix, and, you know, not showering culture can be a little bit difficult.
Yeah. And like, it's totally okay to wear sweatpants for 4 months too. Like that, there's no shame in that, but just carve out 2 hours at whatever interval to not do that and have sex and feel great. I will say I'm in my basement right now. Like this is my own space. And if you have maybe not a basement, just depending where you are, but finding a space that's just yours, that no one else is going to enter, and you know that's your bedroom. It might be a nook, but every day I need to have that space. That's like
even if it's just the bathroom, even if it's just hiding in the bathroom, sitting on the toilet, keeping that door shut.
Yeah,
you know,
the toilet. Yeah,
hide in the pantry. Whatever you can get.
Yeah, just take what you can get and make it yours.
Make it yours. Own it. So I would love to know if there are any toys in particular that are really tickling your fancy right now, you know, on the topic of making things special and keeping things spicy. What has really been piquing your interest, and what do you think is going to be of the consumer's interest right now?
Ooh, okay. So there's a couple ones for couples like myself that are at home together. I think the simple stuff is also rad. Like lube is underrated. So
yes,
that is something that everyone needs. It should be an essential item up there with when you're doing your food shopping and getting your alcohol. You're getting lube, okay? Before anything else, I think lube's just like such a great tool in the bedroom for couples at home and also for singles. Now, the thing, because I study sex tech and I'm into, you know, the futuristic side of that, I can't not talk about that. So that's kind of the opposite of lube, which is a super simple ingredient, and you want to go for clean stuff. Lovehoney is a bunch on their site. I think on the other end of things, when we're talking about tech, let's talk about Teledildonics, Ali. So Teledildonics.
Talk to me about that. What is a Teledildonic situation? Let's go.
So there's smart sex toys or Bluetooth, Wi-Fi, app-enabled sex toys. And these are kicking up a bunch right now because of the lockdown, because people are situated all over the world and can't be in touch with their partner, or maybe they're in the pantry and their boyfriend or girlfriend or whoever's upstairs. So there's two that I think are really fun that Lovehoney have that are in their Desire range. So the Desire range is like the high-end luxury range. They have rechargeable panty vibrator and an app-controlled love egg vibrator. So these sorts of things are just kind of, again, when we're looking for fun, like we want just fun, light, inspiration, ideas. The app-controlled vibrators, the app-controlled eggs and things that you put in panties are really fun and can be used anywhere in the world. So you do not have to be in the same house. You could be in the same house / you know, part of the kitchen. But that sort of stuff is really interesting for everyone.
I was just thinking one of you could be at Trader Joe's. This could be an amazing opportunity to spice up all the mundane tasks that we all need to do with, you know, buying toilet paper, buying paper towel, buying food. You know, you're online at Trader Joe's. That line can be very long. And the next thing you know, there's little something tingling in your panties that makes it a lot easier to wait out that line. This to me seems like an obvious choice of something that people should invest in for their day-to-day life.
No brainer. Yeah. The post office. Oh, there's so many different uses. Anything boring just instantly becomes interesting and exciting once you have something app controlled inside your pants.
Yeah, I would completely agree. Now I'm like thinking of all the scenarios: walking the dog, taking out the trash. I mean, it's absolutely endless. I'm sorry. I feel like I interrupted your beautiful spiel about all the products that you like by just being like, you put this in your pants for Trader Joe's.
No, Trader Joe's. But that, look, when eventually we can all go out to festivals, like that's also really interesting, going to dance parties with that. There are so many uses for Teledildonics. But yeah, I think that's something that's been really exciting at the moment because the innovation is coming along. And pre-lockdown, I think people weren't really interested in sex toys that controlled, you know, across distance as much. There was no necessity there. Like it was kind of, oh, this is fun, this is novelty. But now people are like, let me look this up, you know, let me see how I can connect with someone across the world. So yeah, it's been top of mind for me.
Yeah, same here. I mean, I've been thinking a lot about how, you know, the forced slowdown of the hustle and bustle of our lives has really brought sex to center stage because before people who really, I'm making rash generalizations here, obviously, but I feel like people who really valued like a prosperous work life or got their sense of self-esteem from their productivity, sex was considered like something that you did after a drunken date night or a luxury that you would have to plan ahead for, or the media would have you believe that you should be having sex or you're having too little sex or too much sex. I mean, it was always kind of something that was kind of on the peripheral. And now I feel like with the forced lockdown, with the forced slowdown, sex has become like an essential self-care item. And so we've been thinking about sex in terms of taking care of ourselves, you know, washing our face, brushing our teeth, and masturbating. We've been thinking about sex as a way to keep our perhaps, you know, struggling relationships from all these months together from unraveling. But also just as you say, like people before perhaps weren't even considering how a teledildonic, you know, contraption could really like better their lives. But I do feel as though sex has become less of like a luxury or a commodity now and just like a center point of being a human.
Yeah, people have sex or masturbate to go to sleep, you know. I think that when I was, over here. I was doing this sex therapy course, and they gave us, I remember this so well, they gave us a handout, and it was a printout of pages of all the reasons people have sex and masturbate. And I was like, this people need to know this, because so often we equate having sex or masturbating as doing one thing, like, as you said, like this luxury or this like thing that we do to connect with someone. But actually, sometimes you just masturbate because you're bored. In fact, we're experiencing that a lot, or to go to sleep, or to relieve anxiety, or these other 50 reasons, or as you said, to try and save a relationship. There are so many different reasons that we do this. And I think that's really coming to light now, and no shame in that. Like, you need an orgasm to go to sleep, go for it. There doesn't need to be a big high-end production. And of course, you don't need Teledildonics, but that is something that people are like, I want to have fun, or I like want to connect with people across, however many rooms, countries, whatever. But I think recognizing that, yeah, I have sex or I masturbate for 100 different reasons.
So we've talked a lot about couples, but we haven't talked as much about singles. I am one of those. And not only have I been single through the pandemic, but I have been quarantining with my family. I have needs, as any person does. And so navigating how to take care of those needs while knowing that the walls are relatively thin has definitely been interesting. But my favorite thing about all of it has been because there's something taboo about masturbating when you know that, like, not only your parents, but just like anybody that you wouldn't want to see you is close by. There's something that's just kind of innately exciting about that. And this makes me sound like a real sicko, but it's been really, really fun to kind of just like rediscover these small ways to spice things up. And we've been talking a lot about fun, a lot about humor. And, I think in both sex and beyond, it's all about the little things now. So not only have I been having a great time, experimenting with the various toys that I have, but also just thinking about, what if someone walked in, or, what if someone heard? So I would love to hear a little bit of your insight on the plight of the single person in the pandemic.
Yeah, wow. I think you are not alone, clearly, in this debacle. There are plenty of people out there that are experiencing the same thing, and I love that spin on it of having the excitement. I think for a lot of people, it's the stress of like, oh my God, someone might walk in, but there's also like a tantalizing aspect about that sort of, I think no shame in that. That's awesome. Some of the more silent technologies in sex tech are getting a good workout. I know the Womanizer Pro 40, which is the clitoral suction vibrator. I don't know if you've tried that yet, but that has...
Yes, I have. Many a time.
There's some wild feedback on that of, many a time, many people are using that and finding that, it can create an orgasm within a couple of minutes, which is great if you want that, but also it's quiet. Like, one of the things is people are, especially with housemates or things, like, how do we make sure that the vibrator, the sex toy that I'm using isn't going to be like so obvious and so loud. So I think those sort of toys are getting, from what I've seen in the research, quite a good workout. But also in that, people are masturbating a lot more than they normally would. So in the COVID study, the lockdown study that Lovehoney did, they said 45% of people are reporting that they're masturbating more than they normally would. I don't know if that's the case for you, Ali.
I've always been somebody who enjoys a little flick of the bean. So I don't know if you could say that now is more than usual, but I will say that I have definitely identified like specific times in which I like to do it. I suffer from a lot of anxiety, especially as a creative person. That is like the easiest way for me to shut down my anxiety. Insomnia, bam, you try every pill on the shelf, none of it works. you go for it a little bit, right away you're falling asleep. And I think that's just such a cool insight that I've had, where I've always been someone who's enjoyed doing it as a way of learning about what I like. But when it comes to kind of seeing it's more like holistic or wellness oriented properties, that's been so awesome.
Yeah, but that's actually a great point. The other thing I was going to mention in the surveys, 90% of the respondents said masturbation is helping them relieve stress. And I think we're coming to this point where like masturbation isn't just about, the wild orgasm and, having that fun, enjoyable orgasm. Sometimes you're just really stressed out. And that is the case for the majority of people right now, is like orgasms and masturbation can be just a form of relieving stress. So I think that was another insight that came out in the survey for people, single or couples, right? And I think it's such an interesting time. We see on Instagram as well all these like hashtags and t-shirts about like meditate, masturbate, hydrate, and that movement around like normalizing masturbation, because it's going on in every single apartment, house around you, no doubt, as it should.
Yeah, absolutely. And, something that just occurred to me as we've been speaking is a lot of people who have been either, living alone or just living as a single person throughout the pandemic have been focusing a lot on self-betterment. So a lot of people have been learning how to cook. We see tons of sourdough bread and fermenting and making
banana bread.
But so much banana bread. Who is doing the PR for banana bread? Because it's the best PR campaign I've ever seen. So much banana bread. But it's a lot of cooking, cleaning, as you mentioned, doing puzzles, reading books, catching up on TV. But thinking positively, as I think we both like to do, there's something that's really special about getting all of this time alone to kind of explore what you like without shame. I think that a lot of sex, especially amongst young people, has to do with trying to please your partner, which is obviously an amazing thing and part of what makes sex fun. But I also think that a lot of people, namely women, should focus more attention on figuring out what they enjoy and what brings them pleasure. And I do, for that reason, also see masturbation as a form of self-betterment and not just self-care, because the more that you know about yourself, the better and more involved and more present lover you're going to be for somebody else. And I think that that's just really awesome that we're given all this time to be by ourselves without disturbances. And I can only imagine how awesomely that's going to impact our lives in the future.
Yeah, you made me think of a fun idea. I don't know if you've tried this before, but sex journaling. So sex with yourself,
No,
or
I've never done that.
Or with a partner, right? And it's, I work in tech. It's the least technical thing. It's literally with a notebook and a pen, and it's journaling about the experience afterwards. And it may sound woo-woo to people. It may sound really familiar to people that journal anyway. But even if it's just for 5 days, which is about my limit, is journaling your sexual experiences with your body. And for the tech nerds out there, like tracking your orgasms and, figuring out what worked, what didn't, what you liked, but on a more, I guess, holistic and reflective level, thinking about, well, how was that experience? How was I feeling before? How am I feeling now? Every orgasm is different. And I think that was a beautiful thing that comes out of that experience of doing a sex journal, is like really getting focused on like, what was that orgasm like? And like, oh yeah, that was like, and explaining it in whatever terms you want. Like, I don't know.
That's so fascinating to me, though, because why are all of us collectively so fast to journal about our feelings? There's nothing that feels better than sitting down with a notebook and being like, "Dear diary, today sucked," or like, "Today was amazing," or "This person finally made eye contact with me," or "Something amazing happened at work." Why are we so quick to get those thoughts and feelings down? But the idea of having a sex journal never even occurred to me until you mentioned it right now. That never struck me as the kind of thing that I should be really diving into from that, kind of hybrid emotional analytical standpoint. Why do you think that is?
Yeah, I think you're right. We are very quick to dismiss sex in our lives and in culture in general. It's always been relegated to this like dark, dirty corner of the internet, or like, oh, it only happens over here. And so we're really not in touch with what sexuality is to us, what our sex is like. And so it almost happens in this very small container or window of our days, right? Where we're like, well, this is the sex time, and I'm like this person when I'm having sex, and then the sex ends, and now back we go into our like normal lives of, eating chips in bed, whatever we want. But the sex journal is really a way of like getting in touch with all of that, and actually then what I found is it threads throughout your day because you're more aware. Just like journaling makes you more aware of your day-to-day emotions, just as meditation does too. Journaling about sex, about your specific orgasm, you start to think about, oh, this feels good, and you're much more aware when you go into your next sexual experience of like, well, yeah, I mean, it can sound like you've got a doctor in your head. You're like, well, that feels good, and this was. But it is actually, I think it's a great experiment to do with yourself, and it made me more aware of aftercare too, which is, we could talk about that too. It's just like such an important part of sex is the after part of sex, and I felt like through the journal, I realized, oh, there's this whole other thing. Like it doesn't just end here. There's this whole other thing. Another fun use of it is if you've got a new toy, right? Or you're buying a whole heap of new things, or a kit or a BDSM kit, is like really getting in touch with what was that experience like.
Then you can parlay that into a bunch of Amazon reviews, right? You can go on Yelp, you can go on Amazon. It's like you have a journal, and then you're also like the highest rated person on these websites because you have so many reviews of a product. 2 for 1 special.
Next thing you know, you're a sex blogger.
Yeah. I mean, it's inevitable. We're all in our hearts. We're all just sex bloggers. Yeah. We're all just waiting for the opportunity to morph into our final form as a sex blogger. But you mentioned something really interesting, which was the concept of aftercare. I would love for you to elaborate on that a little bit, because you're correct. No one really thinks about that. We think about either like, kind of having what some people call a post-nut clarity situation where you come out of your head and you're like, oh my God, that was so embarrassing. What was I thinking? And then, you hide the sex toy away, and you or you wash it and you put it in the drawer and you don't look at it again. Or if you're with another person, you have a cuddle and maybe you have a shower, and then, you eat a snack and then you go to bed. But that's fascinating because nobody really talks about kind of how to nourish yourself afterwards. So what are some of the important things to know about that?
Yeah. Well, I think the most important thing to know is like, what do you like to do? And that's your aftercare. And yeah, to your point of like just pausing a second before you rush to like put everything away and end that experience, is like, what do you really enjoy doing? Is it that you go and take a hot shower for like 20 minutes? Is it that you like to lay in bed and eat chips, as I said? Maybe, for other people it's cigarette, for other people it's cuddling and being close. Especially when you're in a couple, this is a conversation that you should have. It's like, what's your version of aftercare? Like, what do you like to do after sex? I think that is a conversation that's totally left out and is important, but also getting in touch with what does feel good to you. And if it's falling asleep, that's also cool too. But there are ways, just like there are interesting ways to masturbate and new techniques and things to try. There are experiments that you can make with aftercare. Maybe it is having, a massage from your partner. Maybe it's having a cup of tea together. Maybe it's just like cuddling, or, you like your belly stroke, whatever it is. Experimenting with different forms of aftercare, because if you think you don't have something that you need to do, you're wrong. So yeah, try and see what that might be. I don't know. Do you have a sense of what your aftercare is for you? Because also aftercare is for anyone, like single, couple, whatever.
I mean, I'm starving. Like, I'm always starving, but especially after sex or especially after masturbating. If I don't fall asleep with the masturbating, it's food, right? And then with the sex, it's food. Even if I'm the one on my back doing nothing, food. So definitely having a snack is very, very important to me. And then having a shower is also kind of a nice way to, gradually close up that the session, right, and go into whatever you're doing with the rest of your day or your night. But just to wrap everything up, in terms of keeping all of these incredibly like adventurous ideas that we've tossed around alive post pandemic, what would you recommend that people do? Because as we've said, this has been such a special time for self-awareness and adventurousness and awareness of your partner and expanding your boundaries beyond your wildest dreams. So when the normal hustle and bustle kind of takes place again, how do we keep this sparkly, interesting time alive?
Yeah, I mean, this is make it your priority, like we do with anything, that's important to us. And this should be important. I put this in the category with physical exercise. Like, I'd much rather have sex than go to the gym. So how do you make that a priority for you? Whatever that looks like. Some people are super disciplined and they're like, I have to have this in the calendar. For me, it's like, oh, after a couple of weeks, if stuff hasn't happened, I'm like, oh, this is a priority that I need to address. Or, journals are a good thing. But for me, it's like, there is no magic formula that I think people get stressed out. Oh, I've tried this. Once you've, tried something and you like it, you're going to want to keep going, and keeping an adventurous explorer hat on, if you will, and keeping that a priority is sort of the easiest, simplest way to keep enjoying your sexuality.
And keeping that journal is a genius idea that you just had. I really think that if people have a journal and they are able to look back on it and see how much joy or how many, emotions they felt from all these different situations, it would like encourage them to keep going, for sure.
Yeah, totally front of mind then. It's like it's like a routine, like checking your email, You've got it by the bed, you're like, oh yeah, cool.
Email,
Thanks,
Instagram, sex journal. Amazing. Well, this conversation was amazing. You are so awesome and have so many unbelievable insights that I'm definitely going to infuse into my own single life with my parents. So thank you for giving all of us your time today.
Tell them to start a sex journal of their own.
I will not be doing that. I will not be having that conversation with my parents, but you can tell them to start one. I'll give you their email addresses. You can take care of that.
Thanks, Allie.